Santa Barbara, 2005. Michael Jackson is acquitted on charges of child molestation and is driven at high speed to his remote sanctuary of Neverland. Within hours, he's on the move again. It's the start of a 2-year journey around the globe. He's the world's most famous pop star, and he's in exile, an outcast wherever he goes. My name is Jacques Peretti. I'm a writer and a lifelong Jackson fan. I'd watched with the rest of the world as he'd been accused, acquitted, and then disappeared. After the trial, we'd never got to the bottom of the story, but now we can, because people who knew him are prepared to talk about him, some for the first time. The people who loved him, the people who tried to bring him down, and the people who really knew him. So I went on the trail to meet them, and what I heard changed my view of Jackson forever. The most famous and forgotten man on earth.
Good evening. We will begin tonight with lot number 871 of the catalog, the handwritten ABC lyrics by the Jackson 5.
My journey began at an auction I heard was taking place in the back room of a casino in Las Vegas, organised as a result of a bungled deal between the Jacksons and an East Coast businessman to open a Hard Rock Cafe-style chain of restaurants. There were rumours that Jackson was broke. It was all here, every iconic object from Jackson's career, his trademark sunglasses, the hat from the Smooth Criminal video, bow ties from the Jackson 5. I expected there to be hundreds of people clamouring for a piece of Jackson history. But this was it. This is who turned out.
Lot number 871 of the catalog, Jackson 5 Japanese comic art. And $500 for the lot, bidding at $500. $300 to open the bid, bidding at $300. Interest in the lot at $200. $100 to open the bid. Is there any interest in the lot at $100? Pass, please. Lot number 639, the Jackson Family Little Rascals collection, and $500 for all of the Little Rascals things, $500, $300 to open the bid, bidding at $300. Is there interest in the lot at $200 as an opening bid? $200 to open the bid. Is there interest in this at $200? Any interest in this? Pass, please.
I knew things were bad, but not this bad. No one, literally no one, cared about Jackson anymore. Perhaps in spite of being found innocent in 2005, Jackson had known this for himself, leaving the country to wander the globe for 2 years. Sightings of Jackson had become increasingly random and bizarre. In Dubai, dressed in full purdah, where he was arrested for entering a women's toilet. In Saint-Tropez, allegedly dressed again as a woman in a floppy hat. And in Japan, signing autographs for $6,000 a throw. In London, he appeared at the World Music Awards and was booed off stage before he could sing a note. There was even a rumour that he'd be at the auction, or bidding online, trying to buy back his own stuff. The auction went on for 2 days, trundling through 2,000 lots. It had originally been valued at $50 million, but no one was really bidding for anything.
Advertisements at $500 for these, interest at $300, $200 to open.
It seemed to me that Michael Jackson, the most successful entertainer in history, had hit rock bottom. How on earth had it got to this point? I wanted to meet the man I'd always been intrigued about, Bob Jones, Jackson's manager and right-hand man for 17 years. Bob had been on every tour and stayed in every hotel. He'd rode every triumph with Jackson and dealt with every scandal. He'd never agreed to be interviewed before. I knew Bob lived in Los Angeles, but the address he gave me was downtown, in one of the...
And Michael was on the phone and he said, look, I would like to meet with you and see if there might be some interest on your part in coming to work for me. After some conversations, etc., I joined.
What is your job?
You know, so it was and doing everything. One of my main things is to try and create a legacy for him. Frank Sinatra was known as the chairman. Bruce Springsteen was the boss. So I came up with the king of pop, rock, and soul. And he shortened it to the king of pop.
Bob would be one of the people to help me make sense of the Jackson story. And there was another key person I needed to meet. Randy Taraborelli was one of Jackson's oldest friends. They'd met when both 10 and remained in close contact throughout Jackson's darkest times. Randy had been at Michael Jackson.
There was a time when he was young when Joe raised his hand to Michael. When Michael took a strong position against it and said, if you hit me or ever hit me again, I'm just not going to sing again. And that hit Joe in a place that he firmly understood, because Joe understood more than anyone that Michael Jackson was the power behind the five, and that if Michael decided he wasn't going to sing again, that could be the end of everything.
What Randy was telling me was that the Michael Jackson story wasn't quite the story we thought we all knew. According to Randy, Jackson wasn't the victim of abuse. He was the golden goose, and he knew it by the New York club scene and a mesmerizing video of Jackson dancing that announced he was now centre stage, doing it for himself. This is supposedly the moment Jackson went mad, went wacko, so I wanted to find out if this was true.
Michael Jackson went to his people and presented a copy of P.T. Barnum's biography and said, creating a circus-like character, a bizarre character for the media's consumption.
What Randy was telling me was that Jackson cynically constructed a character that would keep the world at bay. Wacko Jacko. It was his finest achievement, an entirely fictitious version of Michael Jackson. Do you think it's the case that he actually put all this stuff out there as a kind of smokescreen?
Oh, of course. Michael is a very clever person as far as creating. His whole life is tied up into building this image that's not necessarily true.
It starts with an oxygen tent that he sleeps in, except he doesn't really sleep in it, and he doesn't own one. He then buys the bones of the Elephant Man. No, that wasn't true either. Luckily for Jackson, the press began to invent their own, communing with the ghost of John Lennon, or levitating as a form of relaxation. Burnt in a Pepsi ad, Jackson makes it a Wacko Jacko moment. Jacko's wackiest development was Bubbles, a story that Jackson had moved a chimpanzee into his home. Jackson said, "I can't believe that people buy it. We can actually control the press. This is an important breakthrough for us." Together, Bob and Jackson had invented Wacko Jacko to keep the world from getting to the real Michael Jackson. So if Wacko Jacko was a construction, what was it hiding? I was about to look behind the crazy cardboard cutout.
In Michael Jackson's case, it was always the boys he was interested in.
According to both his detractors and his friends, this is where the story of Jackson's downfall really begins.
After he became so famous, you started to see a shift in Michael Jackson's personality. He really became sort of increasingly unhappy. People started really wanting to know more about him. He just did not feel qualified in his own world and in his own life.
His unhappiness pushed him to look for recognition beyond the pop world. He began by asking Bob Jones to get him a knighthood from the Queen of England.
Look, Michael Jackson has the mind of a genius, and it's just consistently coming up with all of these different things. Yes, he wanted to be knighted. They weren't, they thought we were crazy calling there.
But he did have more luck with Ronald Reagan in 1987, inventing an award for Reagan to give to him.
Outstanding example you have set for the youth of America and the world.
Jackson was given so many awards, he ran out of awards to be given. He began wearing medals and a military tunic, the medals from a British regiment, who objected but failed to stop him. Jackson was a king, but without a kingdom. Awards were not enough. He needed his own principality.
Neverland is me, you know. It represents the totality of who I am. It really does. I love Neverland.
So if Jackson wasn't the abused kid or Wacko Jacko, how come Neverland is such a genuinely weird creation? Jackson was now a king in his own kingdom. But was Neverland a fortress to keep the world outside? A place in which he could pursue his fantasies properly for the first time? Michael Jackson released this video to show the world how much he really loves kids. But is this how it comes across? Is it all it seems? Is this a man who enjoys innocent fun, or are we watching something darker at play?
All of his money.
So far, I've met the people who'd stood loyally by Jackson for 20 years. Now I was meeting the people who tried to bring him down. I travelled to New York to meet Di Diamond, the TV reporter who'd not only broke the first allegations of child abuse, but went on to make Jackson the mission of her career. For the next decade, Diamond tirelessly pursued every lead, refusing to stop even when her pursuit of Jackson threatened to tip into an obsession.
Neverland. It's Disneyland. In many respects, it's better than Disneyland. You don't have to stand in any lines and nothing costs any money. It's perfect. It was nirvana for Michael Jackson.
Jackson called Neverland his greatest triumph, a place that said more about him than anything else in his life. Neverland is deserted now, but at the height of Jackson's fame, it was filled with children, many of whom were hoping to break into the entertainment business. But where were these kids coming from? Di Diamond explained to me that these kids weren't just Jackson fans. They were looking to launch their careers.
Oh, you're casting a music video? Oh, my son, my daughter would be great. In Michael Jackson's case, it was always the boys he was interested in. Some did get cast in videos, some did not. Many of them got phone calls from Michael Jackson afterward. And can you imagine a young boy getting a phone call from somebody like Michael Jackson? They felt so special. You know, I lived in Hollywood for many years, and when you look at those parents hoping against hope that their child is going to break through and make it, you can almost see how they would very nearly offer their children up.
What Di was telling me was that Jackson wasn't initiating these introductions to kids himself. It was the parents. The story emerging was much darker and more complex than I'd imagined. I wanted to meet the other key character in the Jackson story, Victor Gutierrez, the investigative journalist who'd got deeper into the story of the boys than anyone else. Gutierrez fled the US for 10 years, the result, he says, of threats against him. Like Diamond, Gutierrez has relentlessly pursued Jackson to this day. I met him in a deserted car park in LA because of his continuing fears about Jackson. He had never agreed to an interview before.
Many parents were sending pictures of their own boys and girls, but all the little girls, all the letters have to be thrown in the garbage. So they have to select all those photos and letters and give it to Michael. Then Michael called back saying, I want to meet that boy. Call them. So they have to call them. So everybody participated.
What Di Diamond and Victor Gutierrez separately unearthed was Michael Jackson's exploitation of the Hollywood system, the casting catalogues, auditions, and the hope of showbiz mums and dads, prepared to do anything to get their kids into the business. This is Michael with Emmanuel Lewis, 12-year-old star of TV show Webster. According to both his detractors and his friends, this is where the story of Jackson's downfall really begins. Lewis was a dwarf and considered something of a celebrity misfit, just as Michael Jackson was. They were clearly close, but what was the story behind the relationship?
I think Michael saw a lot of himself in Emmanuel Lewis. I think what he saw in Emmanuel Lewis was what he wished he had been like as a child. Because Emmanuel Lewis really was a really happy kid. And Michael had a lot of fun with him. They were like two little kids. And it was a great friendship. But that said, it was really sort of the beginning of the perception of Michael, you know, being friendly with youngsters in a way that didn't really make sense to people.
And he found Michael Jackson in the lower bed with his son, spooning him as a man would spoon his wife.
And what do you think was going on?
I have no idea.
I think you do.
Oh, you do?
I felt as if I was beginning to descend into the basement of the Jackson story. There were scores of boys who had been connected to Jackson in a similar way, faceless, nameless boys. But Victor told me that the relationship around which everything turned was Geordie Chandler.
It almost seems like the cosmos brought Michael Jackson and Geordie Chandler together. They met in a Chinese restaurant when he was a small little boy. Flash forward many years, and there's Michael Jackson with a broken down car showing up in the office of a rental car place. That man that owned that was the stepfather to Geordie Chandler. He knew Geordie loved Michael Jackson. So he called on the phone very quickly and said, "Quick, bring Geordie down here. You'll never believe who's here." And so they were brought back together again.
The story reported across the world was that Geordie was the kid Jackson paid off. But I was about to find out that Geordie was a bigger deal than that.
When Jackson put the attention into this boy, Geordie fell in love. They were, the parents were divorced. He had two step brothers, but he was a nobody within the family. And Michael put all this attention. Instead of going to concerts, tours, or having important meetings, he was spending time with Geordie.
There is a story that Michael actually moves in to the Chandler's house.
He did. He did move in, lock, stock, and barrel. He just bunked in the same room as Geordie Chandler. There were bunk beds. One slept on one, and one slept on the other. Except Evan Chandler walked in one night, and he found Michael Jackson in the lower bed with his son, spooning him as a man would spoon his wife.
Jackson spent a month in the house, a whole month. So the stepmom, Natalie, had to go to work. Geordie went to work. The father, Evan Chandler, went to work as a dentist. So somebody had to take care of the house, and Jackson became the nanny. He did laundry. He wanted to do the laundry for Geordie. He was folding all the clothing for Geordie. He was making the bed of Geordie, helping him with his homework, and he was cooking for him. He was like another maid.
Whatever kind of relationship these two people had, Michael and Chandler, sort of made Michael Jackson lose all of his sense. For a person who was always about image making, it was very unusual that he had finally gotten to a point where he didn't really care what people thought.
To push it to the edge at the World Music Awards in Monaco. Geordie was later to call this trip their honeymoon.
The honeymoon with Geordie Chandler in Monaco was interesting on several levels because they traveled there for the awards ceremony, the World Music Awards, but he took not only Geordie Chandler, but his mother and his sister. In very typical fashion, he gave the mother a credit card and said, "Go shopping." It was just Geordie and Michael in that room.
Jackson is in the suite with Geordie. This is a photo of the two life-size mannequins of Sikh warriors that Jackson would place at the door of his bedroom to guard from what he called, "Why did no one stop him?" Not the police, not Geordie's mother, and not Jackson's manager. And what do you think was going on?
I have no idea.
I think you do.
Oh, you do?
I could make a guess.
Well, whatever, you know. Que sera, sera.
I really know what happened in that room, but all we know for sure is that while the award ceremony continued, Jackson and Geordie remained in the suite.
It's a huge suite with a huge bathroom and a huge bathtub. And somehow the boy was convinced to get into the bathtub with Michael Jackson. Once they got into the hall, Michael Jackson had the mother and the sister there. They sat behind, and he had Geordie come around and sit in his lap. He was sitting right next to the Prince of Monaco. It got very embarrassing. He was bouncing Geordie up and down on his lap. His nickname for the boy was Rubba, whispering, Rubba, Rubba, Rubba.
Geordie is 14. He dresses the same as Jackson, and he's learnt by heart Jackson's secret vows of friendship. No wenches or bitches. Live with me in Neverland forever. Be better than best friends.
It was so embarrassing that one of Michael Jackson's aides went to him and said, you know, you really should have the boy go back to his seat in the row behind. But he wouldn't hear of it.
I said, stop. This is wrong. At the World Music Awards, the first time we went there and got 8 awards. And he sat next to Prince Albert.
Jackson was losing control.
He was thrown out of the Mirage Hotel for a party.
Now, wait a minute. Cut the camera off and the sound.
He was at the Mirage Hotel, and he was holding court with groups of boys.
So if Michael Jackson was having a relationship with Geordie Chandler, why was no one stopping him? I could understand why Jackson's entourage did nothing. But the person I wondered about was Geordie's father, Evan Chandler, a dentist. I dug deeper and found that as well as being a dentist, Evan was also a screenwriter.
He did a film, Men on Tights.
Which film?
Men on Tights.
Men
it's
on
like
Tights?
the Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote the script for that?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
he was a kind of low-level Hollywood player.
Exactly. And all of a sudden you see Michael Jackson in your house, and you can do business with Michael Jackson.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A month after the Monaco trip, Evan Chandler asked his son if there was a sexual element to their relationship. Geordie said there was. Evan wanted compensation for his son and didn't want him in the public eye. But because this is Hollywood, he began negotiations. Jackson's team proposed a 3-movie deal, plus cash compensation, but Chandler refused. And it was only after negotiations finally broke down that the police got involved. I'd always thought that this was the moment when the police finally caught up with Michael Jackson, but I was finding out that this wasn't the story at all. The deal between Chandler and Jackson had faltered, and now it was the police's turn to swoop Neverland. But now, before they arrived, Jackson's chauffeur leaves with a suitcase filled with papers. It is widely believed that Jackson was tipped off about the raid by someone in the LAPD. Searching through Neverland, the police discovered that the corridor leading to Jackson's bedroom was fitted with sensors.
If you got near his bedroom, noise makers would go off in the bedroom and let him know that people were getting near. There was a machine that you put a quarter in and you try to pick up things and drop them out. And that there were $100 bills in there for kids.
Even stranger was the secret chamber behind the bedroom.
There's a secret hidden bedroom. All along the stairs going down, there are little porcelain dolls perched there.
For the first time in his life, Jackson was powerless. Allegations emerged from leaked reports of the police interview with Geordie, of him being masturbated by Jackson, and of Jackson's euphemism for semen, which he called duck butter. Jackson was made to strip off in front of the police to see if Geordie's description of blotches on Jackson's penis and testicles were accurate. They were.
I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week.
The police investigation and the medical examination upon which Geordie's testimony was based was borne out by what the police saw at that examination.
No, the subsequent settlement of over $20 million was the answer that bore out whatever.
We have concluded that because the young boy who was the catalyst for this investigation has recently informed us that he does not wish to participate in any criminal proceeding where he is named as a victim, that we must decline prosecution involving Mr. Jackson.
But what people don't know is the true cost to Jackson. He was never allowed to see Geordie again.
Settling it, I think, definitely gave Michael Jackson a sense that he can get out of anything. And I think it emboldened him, in a sense, and made him a little bit more defiant to be able to do whatever he wants to do and live his life the way he wants to live it, and the hell with everybody.
You know, sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Jackson was losing control. He was not writing music, he was not composing or meeting friends or getting in touch with important people. He was canceling every interview and meeting.
He was thrown out of the Mirage Hotel for a party.
Now wait a minute, cut the camera off and the sound.
He was at the Mirage Hotel and he was holding court with groups of boys. And after he vacated the room, they opened it up, and there was like $30,000 worth of damage. Cigarettes put out in leather couches, broken liquor bottles everywhere, trays of rotting food. As the cleaning crew came in, they were asked, "What's going on?" And they held up the sheets and said, "Can you believe this?" And there were words written in what appeared to be feces, human feces.
No one could stop him, not the managers, not the families of the kids. Only one person spoke out, Jackson's sister, LaToya.
I cannot and I will not be a silent collaborator of his crimes against small innocent children. I have seen checks to the parent of these children, and it's for a great amount, and I'm not speaking pennies.
It was very nearly as if he was saying, "Stop me if you can. You can't stop me. I'm Michael Jackson."
After the Geordie payoff, Jackson's sense of power went beyond anything he'd done before. He built Stalinist statues of himself. On stage, he was bathed in a Christ-like celestial light, standing crucified in front of his crowd. Driven by an obsession with his enemies, Di Diamond, Victor Gutierrez, and the man he saw as the ringleader of his tormentors, D.A. Tom Sneddon.
Tom Sneddon was going to make sure that Michael Jackson was behind bars. And a lot of people thought he had a vendetta against Michael Jackson, and guess what? He did. Because he believed Michael Jackson was a pedophile, and he wanted to see Michael Jackson punished. And so if that's a vendetta, then there you go.
It seemed as if Jackson had become so obsessed with fighting his detractors, he'd allowed his career to collapse. One of the shrewdest operators in the music business, who'd owned half the Beatles' back catalogue and had sold more albums than anyone else in history, was suddenly struggling for cash. Why is he broke?
Well, if you give somebody over $20 million and you buy houses for all of these people, etc., I would imagine you'd be broke too.
It's exciting. The brothers are excited. We're all ready. We've been going through the movement. We're ready to put it on them. You'll see.
Bob told me that in 2001, at an all-time low, Jackson agreed to a reunion with his brothers in New York, something he said he'd never do.
We'll do it the old-fashioned way, like in 1970 on the Ed Sullivan Show.
The brothers did the exact same steps they'd done on the Ed Sullivan Show 32 years before, a poignant reminder of the glory days, except now Jackson's a fairground attraction, dancing for pennies, aged 42. The following day, the Twin Towers collapsed, and Jackson escaped back to the safety of Neverland, but the net was tightening. What was becoming apparent to me was that there were people who'd made it their life's work to bring Jackson down, cheated, as they saw it, by the Chandler payoff. And they weren't going to stop until they'd got him behind bars.
As a reporter, when you do investigation, of course you have to have some little obsession. I call it dedication. The enemy called it an obsession.
I wasn't obsessed with Michael Jackson. I was pursuing unfinished business.
And that unfinished business was about to reach its conclusion.
Do you look back at all the photographs after the Jordy Chandler case? He's surrounded by children. It was very nearly as if he was saying, "Stop me if you can. You can't stop me. I'm Michael Jackson."
The standoff was reaching a critical moment. Jackson had spun his relationship with children into something media-friendly, visiting sick and orphan kids. But it was his relationship with one sick child in particular, Gavin Arvizo, that gave his enemies a new Geordie, the kid that could bring Jackson down.
2003, I'm getting calls from sources saying, "We got another one, and this one's got cancer."
7 counts of child molestation and 2 counts that involved administering an intoxicating liquor to a child for the purpose of committing a felony.
It was the showdown both sides had been waiting a decade for, a battle to the end.
This case is about one thing only. It's about the dignity, the integrity, the decency, the honor, the charity, the innocence, and the complete vindication of a wonderful human being named Michael Jackson.
Tom Mesereau was the sharpest defense lawyer that celebrity money could buy. He'd managed to get charges against Mike Tyson of beating and raping his girlfriend dropped, and he was about to enter what was to become the biggest legal...
I truly did. Even though public opinion was against us, I just saw holes in their witnesses, holes in their case, holes in their theories, and I just ignored the tabloids, ignored the reports, and just looked at things myself, and I realized it was defensible for sure.
I think it was such an unreal situation for a lot of people that no one really knew what to think about it or how to handle it, so everybody just went into showbiz default.
I was standing outside the courthouse one day in Santa Maria, and he came in late, and he saw me across the way, and he stabbed at the air, and he went like that. Go to hell.
If Jackson had lost the plot, so had the prosecution, with their key witnesses, the Arvizo family.
The Arvizos. Are we allowed to say their name?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you know, the first time we saw the mother, Janet Arvizo, on the witness stand, we all looked at each other and said, uh-oh. What is going on here?
She was on the stand for 5 days, and every day she was somebody different.
There's a conspiracy theory that they were put forward as a way of getting Jackson off because they were so unreliable.
That's preposterous. That's completely ridiculous. Yeah, that makes no sense at all. My intention was to prove that they were liars, they were manipulators, that they were out for money, and I think we effectively proved that in the courtroom.
In his desperation, DA Tom Sneddon had thrown everything at Jackson.
The evidence that he had, some of it was really strong, and some of it was so preposterous that it made the strong evidence weak. If he hadn't been so overzealous and ridiculous, he might have won.
In the People versus Michael Jackson case, the jury has reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child.
No one had given Jackson a hope in hell of getting off, but he had. It was the fight of his life, and he'd won, but at a price.
What really needs to be taken into account is the personal devastation the trial had on Michael Jackson. I remember one day when he walked by, it was almost as if he had been taken out of an old dusty attic, and he smelled like mothballs when he walked by me, and I was like, oh man, you know, it was like death.
Jackson was all but destroyed by the trial. But even this wasn't the end. Jackson was not finished. 2 years on, having travelled the globe, Jackson is ready to make his comeback in Las Vegas.
He was one of the most popular men in the world. And no doubt the most talented entertainer ever to hit a stage.
Vegas, the town where stars come to die. And after 2 years of running, this is where Jackson has finally stopped. There's all kinds of speculation as to what the comeback could be. Talk of him building a 60-foot-high robot of himself in the desert, of playing 90 gigs a year, or being wheeled out in a puff of smoke as part of a magic show.
More than anything, he didn't want to work Vegas. One of the biggest things in the world was he didn't want to end up like Joe Louis. He didn't want to end up like Sammy Davis. And he didn't want to be on the stage after he was 40 dancing.
Jackson has nothing, no power, no control, and no money. He's exactly where he never wanted to be, and he's alone.
You worked for Michael. You were very loyal. Could you tell me, why did you stop working for Michael?
I was fired.
And why were you fired?
They said they were changing directions. But the last year that I was working for him, if I had to have a meeting with him, the word was, tell Bob Jones don't bring me no bad news. I was one of the few people that would tell him the truth.
And you didn't want to hear the truth?
That's possibly so. And I got no severance. And I had to go to the state of California and sue for my vacation pay. Please add that. After 17 years.
Do you think he was ever happy?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess he always said he was happy when he was with these kids. That was his happiest moments.
When he spent time with boys, that's the happiest moment of his life. I read the transcript of the trial of Oscar Wilde with Bosie, and he couldn't even concentrate because he wouldn't spend time 24/7 with Bosie. And the same thing would happen to Michael Jackson. This is a love story between a 13-year-old boy and Michael Jackson. And maybe in 50 or 100 more years, we will feel bad that we all went after Michael Jackson when maybe he fell in love with this kid.
Unlike Oscar Wilde, Michael Jackson was found innocent. But was Michael Jackson's story really that of true love? What's beyond doubt is that Michael Jackson and Oscar Wilde do have one thing in common. They're genius.
He was one of the most popular men in the world. And no doubt the most talented entertainer ever to hit a stage.
Is that what you feel?
Oh, most definitely.
$300 to open the bid. $300. Any interest at $200 as an opening bid, bidding at $2. Interest in the lot at $200. $100 to
The bigger you are, the harder you fall. And no one has ever, or ever will again, fall as spectacularly far as Michael Jackson has. His life divides into two halves, before and after Geordie. Before Geordie, he was the most extraordinary and controlling entertainer in show business history. And after Geordie, he just didn't care.
I would like historically for him to be remembered for more than just child molestation. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case.